Guys, welcome to Broward Blueprint. This is a really important one. We're talking about education today, and we have a special Adam Cervera. He just was appointed by the Governor DeSantis. He's making waves. He's in the newspaper a lot, in the headlines. And we have a special co-host, Nicole Pazos, who's running for Sunrise Commission in November. And she also has 3 kids in school, correct?
I do.
So we're going to be diving into school subjects. We're going to be talking about school lunch. We're going to be talking about finances. We're going to be talking about cell phone bans. We're going to be talking about meditation in school, a lot of cool stuff. Let's just dive right in. Okay, Adam, tell us what's going on like with the financial situation. Okay, you had this lease and then you had these other problems going on. Give us a rundown of what you've been able to accomplish since you've come into office.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah,
And
welcome.
happy President's Day, everybody, right?
Yeah,
Let's
definitely.
not forget the significance of today.
Yeah.
It's not just a day off for the kids. We also want to recognize the great presidents we've had in this country and their contributions to the country as we get closer and closer to 250. We're almost there, right?
Yeah, right.
So glad to be on the show. Thanks for having me, and thank you, ma'am, for stepping in as our lovely co-host tonight. It's always great to see you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So Broward County, our district has had some snags of late with our finances, and they've really been unfortunate. And we just can't seem to get out of our own way of late. I'm sure your listeners have seen what I frankly called a debacle. Because, I mean, let's call it what it is.
Right.
We have enrollment issues in our school. Okay? We have enrollment issues. Clearly, space is not a problem for us. And despite this, the district, in its infinite wisdom, decided to rent out an off-site facility to house certain district employees when they could have very easily gone into some of these schools that are operating at 30, 40, 50% capacity.
Right, logic. Right.
Right. Makes sense.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Of course.
So instead of doing the logistically sound thing, they enter this lease agreement with the company by the name of Handy for off-site commercial space to house some of our district employees. Here's the problem, Will. That lease, $2.5 million.
Wow.
Per year.
No, for total. It was a multi-year.
Okay.
This is $2.5 million this district clearly does not have.
Right.
Right? This was a foolish mistake. Fortunately, it came to light, and I was one of the ones who took lead to try to get us out of this lease agreement, which we were able to do late last year. The consensus with the board and the majority of my colleagues happened to agree with me, which incidentally doesn't happen as much as I'd like, but on this particular issue, we were all on the same page.
Right.
Got out of the lease pursuant to a valid termination agreement. We thought we had dodged a bullet on this one. Unfortunately, the folks at Handy called up their lawyer, and they decided to file a lawsuit against the district seeking the remaining sum that was owed on the lease agreement.
Wow.
Millions of dollars.
Right.
We went into settlement discussions, and we ultimately opted to settle. $270,000. Now,
Wow.
this may seem like, well, all right, not that big of a deal. We were on the hook for millions, and we settled for $270,000. Here's the problem. We have a general counsel's office. We have 7 lawyers that work for us. We have termination provisions in our contracts. Those termination provisions are sound provisions. This was the case where we properly terminated. And instead of defending our position like we should have, we immediately opted to settle and give them a check for $270,000.
Wow.
I was against this. I spoke up at every opportunity that I did not think this was the case to settle. But lo and behold, I was overruled. And now $270,000 that perhaps, I don't know, could have gone to our teachers,
Right.
is now being sent to a landlord in a lease agreement that, in my opinion, was professionally terminated.
Right.
So this is just one of the many missteps that, unfortunately, the district has encountered in the last couple of months.
Right.
And while I was proud to lead the ability for us to cancel that contract, I was very disappointed in the end result, which resulted in us having to stroke a check.
And right.
Yeah.
And do a settlement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
So you think that the lawyers were not, all the lawyers that we're employing were not really stepping up to the plate to
no,
defend us?
this one wasn't on our lawyers.
Okay.
I think the termination provision that our lawyers put in that contract, and incidentally, every contract that the district enters into,
Right.
I thought it was sound.
Are these 7 lawyers on retainer? Or are they a contract? Do they work for the school
These
board?
are district employees.
Wow.
We have we have our general counsel,
In-house.
and then we have her assistant general counsels underneath. So these are in-house lawyers.
Wow.
They work specifically for us.
Right.
And with this particular contract, we had a viable termination agreement
Right.
or provision, excuse me.
Right.
Right.
And for whatever reason, after we terminated and we got sued,
Right.
the majority of the board felt that it was better to just throw money at these people than to defend our position, which was very disappointing
What
for
was
me.
the excuse for renting the space in the first place? Was there any kind of like justification for it?
So it's interesting that you bring that up because the person who was in charge of that, our former COO, was a young lady by the name of Wanda Paul, who has made countless missteps in her tenure at Broward County Public Schools.
Okay.
Several months ago, I actually called for her resignation.
I remember that.
Yeah, I saw that in the
I
newspaper.
called for her resignation
Yeah.
on a Saturday, and wouldn't you know it, by Monday I had her resignation letter on my desk.
Yep.
So this was one of her many missteps that she made in negotiating that lease and suggesting that we needed that space to begin with. So I was glad of two things. Number one, that she's no longer on her cabinet.
Right.
And number two, that we were at least able to get out of that rather than paying millions of dollars over the course of 2 years, even though I thought that when we terminated it was proper and we should not have given them any money whatsoever.
Now,
Right.
is this person that was recently resigned? Were they? You know, I noticed in Broward County, it seems like only insiders. Like they don't hire outside people. Was she an insider that kind of worked her way up through the school system?
So this one, no. This one was out of Texas and had worked in some other
So they were
some other.
experienced.
She did have the experience.
Okay.
Unfortunately, she was just not making good decisions.
Right.
Right. Okay.
And in this county,
Right.
when we are operating at a $100 million deficit, we cannot afford to have high-level cabinet members who don't make the right decisions.
Correct.
Right.
So I'm glad that she is no longer part of the team.
Now, there are a lot of theories about why we're losing enrollment. You know, one of the people say it's immigration crackdown. Other people say that people can't afford to live here. There's also a declining birth rate. What do you attribute the 56,000 student loss to?
So I do think it's a number of things. You know, I hear a lot with all of the immigration enforcement stuff that goes along now. I hear a lot of people trying to pin the blame on the immigration stuff.
Right.
The problem is, I don't believe that the numbers actually support that.
Right.
Especially in my district, which we have a very, very high contingent of Latino students. And you just don't see the drop-off solely affecting just Latinos
Right.
when you look at the breakdown.
Okay.
So listen, at the end of the day, could it play a small role in this? Of course.
Yeah.
But I will tell you what I think the bigger issues are. Number one, Broward County is very, very expensive to live in.
Yes.
Okay.
In South Florida.
Right.
I don't know where we rank in the state, but I have to imagine we got to be near the top, right? Because
Right.
I know what property values go for. I know what our taxes are.
Right.
And it's not cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of spots in the state that you can live in,
Right.
and your dollar will stretch a lot further than it does in Broward County.
Especially families.
Especially families with kids,
Right,
right?
right.
So you're seeing those folks migrating to either north,
Right.
to the west coast, to the central part of the state,
Jacksonville.
to Jacksonville,
Yeah.
Duval County, Hillsborough County.
Right.
But you know they are coming out of South Florida.
Right.
And by the way, well, we're not just seeing this in Broward.
Right.
We're seeing this in Dade,
Yeah.
and we're seeing this in Palm Beach.
Right.
Admittedly, not at the same rate as we are in Broward.
Okay.
But it is sort of a phenomenon.
Right.
And I think the last point you touched on is a good one.
Right.
Birth rate.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Way down.
Folks are just not having children at the rate they have been over the last 2, 3, 4 decades.
Right,
Right. I think the average, when you look at the data, the average family will have what, 1.5 kid,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
That's correct.
Now, I've done my part. I've got 3 children. I know
Same.
Nicole has kids as well. So don't look to me.
Right.
But the reality is there has been a slow birth rate
Right.
over the last decade or so.
Right.
And you know where you really start to see that is in our kindergarten classes.
Right.
Right, because our kindergarten classes the numbers are at an all-time low,
Right.
and that obviously supports this theory that people just aren't having children.
Right. Right.
So there are. It's not a single thing that I can just point to and say if we fix this,
Right.
our enrollment will increase.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think it is a litany of things, and we're down about 10,000 kids this year.
Right.
In kindergarten.
No, in total.
Overall. So-
In total,
okay.
we lost about 10,000 students.
Yeah.
Now,
I-
I sent you something, a parent made a TikTok sort of concerned about you intermingling the grades and condensing schools. Is that, you're getting a lot of pushback from that? I mean, I kind of think it's, they said that they're going to give them different bus schedules. What's going on with that? I mean, like, it sounds like it's a bad idea mixing the two, like junior high and high school or elementary.
So just for some context, the school district, after engaging with the community in basically holding multiple sessions in which we went into high schools, we called it the redefining process. And essentially what that was is taking a hard look at some of these schools of ours that are operating at a really low percentage, right?
Okay.
And what do I mean by that? Enrollment numbers. I mean, we had schools that were 30, 35, 40% enrollment,
Right.
which is extremely problematic
Right.
for a district that is having financial problems.
Right.
Because the reality is, in our schools, you know, I can't call FPL
Right.
and say, hey, I only want to pay 40% of the bill.
Right.
Right. Yet we're only seeing 40% enrollment. So we did have to collectively, as a board, make the tough decision to essentially close down several schools,
Right.
which we did. Now, this doesn't mean, well, that we're just throwing kids out on the street.
Right, okay.
This was a calculated decision that was made over the course of essentially years at this point. And what we did was we basically shifted kids over to neighboring schools. So what you saw a lot is, and probably the comment that you were referring to on TikTok was, you know, elementary school A was within a mile of middle school B.
Right, okay.
And both schools were operating at a 40% capacity, right? So if we combine them to get to an 80% capacity and close down the elementary school, you now have essentially the middle school acting as a K through 8.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, there are parents who had concerns about this. You know, I don't want my 7-year-old in the same, my 7-year-old kindergartner in the same school as a 13
grader.
or 14-year-old student, right?
Right.
And I get it.
Yeah.
And I can assure you, we are taking adequate steps to make sure that there's a proper separation in the hallways, whether it be with different bell schedules, whether it be different lunch schedules, different start times if needed. I mean, everything we're finalizing sort of the logistics. But we hear those concerns, and they're valid concerns.
Yeah.
Right. I want the parents to know there are valid concerns.
Right.
However, we will do what we can within our power to sort of split the house, if you will, right? May there be some minimal crossover? Of course.
Right, of course.
But we'll have adequate security in place, whether it's our SROs, our guardians, our administrators, our teachers, to be looking out for that. And I mean, listen, let's be honest, okay? 95% of the time, an 8th grader is not going to want anything to do with a first or second grader. They're going to look the other way.
Yeah.
Will there be the occasional wise guy who may shove a kid or wrestle up his hair or something? Sure. But the reality is, I don't think that's going to be an everyday occurrence. But we will have adequate safeguards in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
And also, I could even say my children, they go through go to a K through 12 school, and I have seen nothing but benefits from that. I mean, siblings get to go to school together, right?
Good point.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it is a good point because my younger daughter, it's basic, getting picked on and things like that, right? What happens? She calls her big sister, right? And she has her big sister there to lean on, right? So she doesn't feel alone. So I think that the K through 12 idea is a great idea. Or even K through 8, whatever it may be, because siblings can go to school together, even, cousins and things like that, right? And they feel like that they can have that, support the younger ones with the older ones there. And like you were saying, there's hardly any interaction in my kids' school with the youngers and the olders, right? They do have the different bell schedule, and there is a lot more security there as well, even different lunch schedules and things of that sort, of course, and they even have different start times too. Right? My older one starts school at 7. My younger one starts school at 8:30. However, we can still drop them off at the same time, and they are still in the same area waiting. However, the older ones have the option of going outside, like in the patio area, whereas the little ones have to still stay inside in the cafeteria. So I think that there's a lot of benefits to that, to be honest with you. I do understand concerns from parents, especially if they've never experienced that before. But I do think that there are other schools that parents can look at just, for their own research and methodologies, just to see if it really does work. And I will definitely say that it does work. Yeah.
Well, it's also the idea of smaller is better, right? Like that, kind of like it's just better managed. I mean, I look at all the cities in Broward. Dania seems to be the best one. It's the smallest, right? It's the best run. Because it's easier, right? So if that philosophy, I mean, we'd more personalized education if we had like smaller schools. But that being said, there's like 300 schools total in Broward. We have 300, 235.
Well, between the traditional public and the charters, we get to that number,
which is a big number.
It is a big number, but we have fantastic schools in this district. We really do, and I will just say this: a lot of the negative stuff that you see or you read about in the news or in the newspaper is really calling more attention to the fiscal mismanagement, which does run sort of rampant on the school board, as opposed to actually the educational values that we're offering to our students.
Right.
You know, I will tell you, it's not all doom and gloom. We are an A-rated school district for the second year in a row.
Yeah. Right.
We are very proud of that. We don't have any D or F schools
Right.
in the entire district,
Right,
which
okay.
is a fantastic accomplishment.
Right.
And by the way,
Yeah.
these are not rankings that Broward County comes up with.
Right.
This is the State Department of Education
Right.
who have certain curriculum, certain criteria, certain thresholds that you need to meet
Right.
in order to get these rankings.
Right.
So from an educational standpoint,
Right.
Broward County is doing well. We have great teachers within our schools.
Yeah.
They love their kids. They come to work every day. They do their the best jobs they possibly can. We've got great administrators.
Right.
We've got great bus drivers. We've got great cafeteria workers.
Right.
We do have great people
Right.
that contribute to the educational product,
Right.
as well as the in-school experience of the kids.
Right.
Where we fall short, and which is why I'm always very busy calling this out,
Right.
really has to do with more of the management of the district as a whole, as opposed to the product at our schools.
Exactly.
Yeah, if anything, when I was doing the research, there was a lot of good news. You know what I mean? Like the school lunch program, you've done a lot of upgrades nutritionally. That seed program we've talked about, and those schools that were the middle schools are teaching them mindfulness and meditation. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in Broward schools, and the Verizon Tech Labs and the Microsoft. Tell us a little about the Microsoft AI.
So
stuff.
we
That
are the
sounds cool.
first school district in the entire nation to partnership with the Microsoft Corporation for their Copilot AI platform.
Okay.
This helps our teachers and select high school students with curriculum planning, educational learning, and really gives opportunities for our folks in the district to utilize the AI platform. Because listen, I think we can all agree, whether we're pro AI or anti AI, I happen to see the benefit in AI.
Right.
This stuff is here to stay.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
And this is definitely like an adapt or die type of situation. Like if you don't get on this train,
Right.
Yeah.
it's moving and you're going to be left at the station.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was very proud of the fact that we're able to get into this partnership with Microsoft. We'll continue to grow with them.
Right.
Let's be honest, the kids love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And as long as it's being used properly, i.e., don't do my essay for me on ChatGPT or on
Right.
Copilot, right? I'm generally for this. I understand, a lot of the tweaks and the kinks have to be worked out, right? I'll mess around on the AI and I'll ask a question that I immediately think, there's no way this is right.
Right.
And in fact, some of them even have like a little disclaimer, like, basically do your trust but verify
Correct.
type of situation.
Right.
So this is a process. There's going to be a learning curve with all of this.
Of course.
But I do think, 5, 10, 15 years down the road,
Right.
this stuff is going to be very heavily integrated into how our kids learn at school, and great resources.
Right.
I mean, remember when we were kids, what happened? You didn't know something. You had to go to the encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Right, right.
You
Or
had
ask
to-
your parents.
Ask your parents about the Encyclopedia
Yes,
Britannica.
right.
You
Right.
Yeah.
dust it off and open it up
Yep.
and check the index.
Yep.
I mean, those days are long gone.
Yeah.
Right. Everything is the amount of information that is available to these kids'
Right.
fingertips right now through the AI is just incredible. And we
And
want
I
to
think
use
what's important too is like from a teacher standpoint is that the teachers, in the future will have to teach the children how to discern correct information and incorrect information, right? Like you said, sometimes we'll type it in and it'll say, something that's completely off. So we need to also teach them how to verify that information. I definitely think that will be a part of the curriculum of the future for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Nicole, are there any schools in Sunrise closing in your district?
No, there's not.
Okay.
There was one that was going to close. However, it was voted on to stay open, and that was
Okay.
Bare Middle. So that was
that was
fantastic
very
news.
controversial too. I saw that
Yes.
a lot on social media.
Yeah.
People, there's a tech Verizon tech hub there, correct, in the school,
Believe
in the Bear
so.
middle.
So they have, I think it's the Amazon program that you're probably hearing about.
Okay,
Yes.
They have like an Amazon. They've partnered with Amazon.
Okay.
And they had certain programs that the middle school kids at Bear were able to utilize.
Right, okay.
And one of the concerns, they were on the proverbial list, if you will, in
Right.
which the board discussed potential
Yeah.
closure for Bear.
Right.
One of the concerns that were raised by the parents over the course of our workshops, and as well as the ones who came in and spoke to us at the meetings when we were deciding on this, is the implementation of those programs if that school were to close.
Right.
And apparently, and I don't know if it was an institutional thing or an Amazon thing, but apparently there was no guarantee that
Right.
program was going to get to transition to whatever school. So I think that and some other reasons, they also had a commitment from the city of Sunrise for approximately $1 million. The city manager came and committed those funds to the school as well.
Right.
I think that coupled with some of these great programs that were there there ultimately led to the decision not to close that particular school in Sunrise.
Also, there was a lot of resident outpour, which we'd like to see, concerns. Now, I live near Olson Middle School. That's one of the schools scheduled to close. That seems to be like a prime real estate location. Now, is that ever taken into consideration? Like, this is closer to the ocean, it's going to be more valuable, or no? And what are we going to do with all this empty property? Are you going to make it into teacher housing? There's rumors of that. What's the plan?
So at this point, everything is really on the table, right? Whether we do housing for teachers, whether we lease the properties, whether we sell the properties, those are all being, whether we develop the institution into another type of school, a technical school, a trade school. Everything's on the table.
Now, are the cities asking to buy for parkland, possibly?
Well, none of the schools
the city could some cities could step in, Sunrise could step in and buy one. I mean, there's none closing there, but like a city could theoretically buy it for a park, right?
Yeah. So I haven't seen any proposals from any of this affected cities for purchase, but if somebody wants to come in and offer us a fair amount, I will certainly consider it.
Right.
I'll tell you this. I see the many arguments on the different sides as to what we should do with these institutions. But the thing that constantly plays on a repetitive loop in my mind is this $100 million deficit that we're operating under. And a lot of these properties are valuable properties between the buildings and the actual land that they sit upon. I mean, we're talking about tens and tens of millions of dollars that could be realized and potentially injected back into the district for our teachers, for our facilities, for raises for our teachers and things like that. So it's going to be a tough decision when the time ultimately comes. Leasing. It's not off the table either. I mean, I wouldn't mind getting a big fat check every month that we can use to do some good things in the district. But we've got to do something that's going to be somewhat income generating for us. Because if we continue down this path, bad things are going to happen. We have a $5.4 billion with a B dollar budget right now.
Wow.
And we're only behind Broward County, in this neck of the woods as to what their budgets are. And to be operating at a $100 million deficit is really frightening. Incidentally, well, I will tell you that $5.4 billion budget, I voted against. I thought there was too much bloat in it, and I didn't think there was enough money in for our teachers. So I was only one of two who voted against that budget when it was passed late last year. But the bottom line is we've got to take some real decisive action here to get this district back on track.
Well, the real valuable building downtown Fort Lauderdale, the school board.
Casey Wright.
How many square feet is that? And is the city of Fort Lauderdale maybe going to make that the city hall?
So
that's a good idea, right?
I'll leave that up to
when was the
Mayor
building
Dean.
built? Was it relatively new?
So it is relatively new. I don't quote me on the date.
$100 million, it's worth.
I will tell you, I'm in favor of closing that.
And of course, you can move it to Sunrise, right?
100%. And we've got enough space in other facilities in and around the county,
or land
where we can house folks. There's no reason for us as a district to be making decisions that are closing schools and stay in this 14-story palace in the sky.
Correct.
Right. Which, by the way, not exactly full. But be that as it may, that is 100%. I am on record, and I've said it, and I'll say it again today. I am in favor of closing that and selling that and reinvesting that money.
But that's
into
sort
our
of
district.
like being talked about actively, correct?
Yes. Yes, that's an active conversation.
And another one of your wins you were telling me about too was which was great, the graduation. Tell us what you did with that. You were able to save the parents, be a hero.
Absolutely.
Tell us.
I was very, very proud to take the lead when the district made a silly decision to essentially take some of our high schools who are used to graduating in, right here at Nova, at the Hard Rock, at the Broward Center for the Performing Arts, right? They were used to going to these top-notch venues to have graduation. Unfortunately, in a quote-unquote cost-cutting measure this year, the district made the decision that they were going to take some of those high schools and move them to local high school gymnasiums. As you can imagine, that didn't go over well with a lot of folks. And I can tell you, especially in my district, there was a lot of very, very upset parents and students. So as soon as I learned that this was happening, I immediately got with the superintendent, and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed for weeks. And I'm proud to report that as of about 2.5 weeks ago, the district flipped the decision, and they are now implementing every graduation this year will be in the same venue as it was last year.
Right.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine,
Congratulations, Adam.
thank
We
you,
like
thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
As you can imagine,
standing up for the parents,
job.
100%.
with the budgets and everything. This is what we
Yeah.
like to hear on Broward Blueprint.
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah.
And to me, that was a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We send these kids to school for 13 years, right, to reach the ultimate pinnacle of success, the graduation.
Right, and their relatives want to come, you were saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to share in that. So you're taking kids who are used to being in venues where
Right.
they were having 7, 8, 9 tickets, right?
Right.
In, collegiate basketball arenas,
Yeah.
the Hard Rock, where, celebrities and,
Sure.
and comedians and rock stars perform,
Right.
and
Right.
saying, no, you can't come here.
Yeah.
You got to go across the county to another school's gymnasium,
Right,
Yep.
right.
right? And by the way,
Yeah.
you're only going to get 4 tickets.
Right.
Right.
So as you can imagine, that didn't go over well. Now, this has never been a knock on any of our gymnasiums that we're going to host.
Of course.
It was never about that because they're fine facilities.
Right, right.
But when you're used to doing things in essentially world-class venues,
Yes.
Right.
we don't want to make our kids different this
Mm-hmm.
year than
Right.
they were last year. So I was proud to take that on, and as you can imagine, our kids were thrilled, and as they should be, because for some of these kids, they may not go on to college.
Right.
This may be their only graduation. This is literally a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Right,
Yeah.
of course.
We need to make this as special as possible for our kids.
And the other thing is like if for us, one of the affected schools was in Sunrise, it was Piper. So I had a lot of parents asking me questions like, well, why can't we just pay for tickets and things of that sort? And I said, because the tickets are already paid for, right? The venue is already paid for, if I'm correct, right, Adam? It was already a part of the budget and the funds were being, appropriated for something else, for money savings or things like that. Is that correct?
Correct. And
Yeah.
and listen, I'm all for saving money.
Of course.
But we're not going to do it on the backs of our kids.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
Agreed.
There's plenty of bloat at the KC Wright building that we need to address
Right.
before we start trying to save a couple bucks
Yeah.
off the backs of our seniors, because those kids have worked too darn hard
Right.
to get to this point
Yeah.
to not have the best graduation possible.
Let me ask you this, Adam. How does the school board work with the county and with the different cities and the state? I know that you mainly said you kind of work mostly with the state, but how do you interact with more of the local cities and the Broward County, or do you at all?
So the way this works is there are 9 of us. Okay.
Okay.
There are 7 quote unquote districts. And I happen to be in District 6, Cooper City, Weston, Davie, Plantation, and Sunrise.
Okay.
And then there are 2 at-large members. So they are basically countywide.
Right, okay.
And there's 9 of us, and collectively we make the decisions that affect everything in the district, from
Right.
policy-wise to teacher salaries, to what our kids eat for lunch and things like that. Everything that revolves around what happens in the district, all 9 of us make those decisions.
Okay.
Everybody has 1 vote,
Okay.
right? And obviously majority wins.
Right.
So we, as a collective body, are essentially independent from the county, right?
Right.
We are independent from the state legislators. Now, the folks in Tallahassee, obviously, they make the laws
Right.
that we in Broward County need to follow,
And the curriculum.
and the curriculum from the state DOE.
Right.
But as far as how our kids are governed and how this
Right.
district is governed, that comes from myself and my other 8 colleagues on the board.
Okay. But how about working with the individual cities? Do you ever kind of like interact with Cooper City
Oh,
Mayor? or-
absolutely, and I have great relationships with the electeds in my respective cities.
Right.
We talk
Did
all
they
the time.
contact you about the graduation?
Absolutely,
I bet you they did, right?
Absolutely. I won't name any names,
Okay,
but
right.
there were people that were
Upset. Right.
And I'll tell you, Will, just to go back,
Right.
the problem with that was a lot of my folks were essentially like, listen, if you would have given us a seat at the table,
Right.
and we would have been a part of this discussion, we would have found you the measly, $30,000 it
Yeah.
costs to do it at the Nova
Right.
facility,
Right.
Yeah.
right? But rather than that, you submit this memo that basically gets distributed
Right.
to everybody saying this is how it's going to be.
Right.
You didn't involve any of the elected officials. You
Right.
didn't involve any city officials. You didn't
Right.
involve any of the PTA moms.
Right.
You didn't do any of that. You're just like, here's a decision. Have fun with it.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
that angered a lot of people.
Right.
Right.
Incidentally, I actually found out that this memo had been distributed because an elected official from one of my cities called me at like 8:00,
Right.
and I got distributed. And I was actually in a dinner, and apparently it got circulated around 5:30. I get a call from him at 8:00. He's like, "What's going on?" I didn't even know what he was talking about.
Yeah.
I had to pull over and we had to discuss the issue.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the highest level of frustration came
Right.
from my city folks is that they just wanted to be a part of the process.
Right.
And rightfully so, because I think if they would have been initially from the get-go,
Right.
as opposed to district staff, perhaps it wouldn't have even never gotten to this point.
Yeah.
Right.
I noticed on your social media, Adam, you make yourself very accessible to parents. Okay, and I had actually somebody saw that you're going to be on my podcast. My dentist, Guyan, who had a son got bullied in the chess class of all places. Right, you would think that would be a civilized setting, right? The chess class, but I guess she kind of thought like I know she's gonna. I don't know if she's reached out to you yet. Did she reach out?
She haven't, but she's more than welcome. You can pass along my
she's
number.
having more meetings at the school, but I guess her concerns were that she felt that the school was trying to dismiss the allegations and kind of like she felt like they didn't want to report it to the school board. But bullying is like it's only become a bigger problem. I was talking to Nicole about it with online. They can follow you online or whatever.
Yep.
What are we doing in Broward County schools about trying to prevent bullying? Is there monitors in the cafeteria? I noticed that's the #1 hot spot for bullying.
So I will tell you, we do have a zero tolerance policy for bullying.
Okay.
Unacceptable, and the appropriate discipline will be lodged if you engaged in bullying,
Is
up
that
to including
suspension, or?
suspension.
Right. Okay.
Right. So we take this very serious. The reality is, unfortunately, kids will be kids sometimes, and sometimes they take things too far.
Right.
Now we know, because study after study will tell us the mental toll that this can take on kids who are constantly bullied at school.
Right.
Yeah.
It can cause them to lose sleep. It can cause them to lose concentration.
Right.
It can cause grades to slip.
Yeah.
And obviously, that's the last thing we want for any of our students.
Right.
So we do take this very seriously. I'm sorry to hear about your dentist and her child about what she's going through, and I'm happy to have obviously an offline conversation with her about ways that I can help if it's in any of my schools, or quite frankly anywhere in the county.
It's Falcon Middle School.
Falcon Cove.
Falcon Cove.
So that is one of my middle schools.
And I guess
so
one of her ideas, I said, well, how could we, prevent this? She said, if a camera was in the classroom recording, I guess you only have it in the hallways, this would be able to have like proof.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of that idea?
So the cameras in the classroom, that is a little bit of a sticky subject.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we
Why?
do have those. We do have those in some confined classrooms.
Right, okay.
Where our ESC students
Right.
and some of our kids with severe disabilities,
Right.
so especially a lot of our nonverbal kids,
Yeah. Right.
attend class.
Okay.
The problem with the cameras in the classrooms everywhere
Right.
is the constant recording.
Right, okay.
Right. And you do have, as a parent in this state, something that's called the Parental Bill of Rights.
Right, okay.
And you have the opportunity to express your displeasure or your desire to not have your child recorded on a constant loop.
Right.
Now, there was a carve out for the confined classrooms,
Right.
and it was actually put into statute.
Right, okay.
And Broward County was part of a pilot program. We've now extended it, but basically the way that the current statute is written is, unless all those parents in those classrooms consent,
Right.
it creates a problem.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we need to figure that out for our most vulnerable students
Right.
before we start putting them in all the other classrooms.
Right.
And how we deal with this, it's number one, the teachers get a lot of training on this.
Right.
Okay.
How to recognize it, how to spot it, what are the tall tale signs.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
We also encourage students to report this.
Right.
Now, I know a lot of times for kids, they have difficulty. I think they call it, snitching. Right.
Yeah.
They don't want to be labeled as a snitch.
Yeah.
Right.
So there are resources that we do offer to report things anonymously, but still kids are a little hesitant
Yeah.
because they don't want to be known as that guy or that gal that goes running to the teacher.
Yeah.
Right.
However, they have to understand
Right.
that if this is being done in a situation where it's not kind of open and obvious, and our teachers do a great job,
Right.
Yeah.
but they can't watch 23 kids every movement at 24/7
Right.
while they're under the camera. I mean, they've got classes.
Yeah.
Right.
And if it's not brought to their attention, they may miss a
Yeah.
slap of the head or a jab in the stomach or whatever the situation is.
Right, right.
So we do encourage our kids to tell the teachers just so they can keep an eye on it.
Right.
In the cafeteria,
Right.
we have our monitors, we have our administrators that are constantly walking up and down all these kids,
Yep.
Right.
making sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. Now, admittedly,
Right.
some of these schools that have thousands of children,
Right. Right.
that becomes a challenge.
Yeah.
Right.
And as much as I'd love to be able to go out and hire 10 more security monitors for the schools,
Right.
the reality is our budget will not allow us to do that.
Right.
So we do give them training, extensive training, to spot these telltale signs of bullying, and we do encourage our kids to file reports. And again, zero tolerance, and, and if it's proven that you are bullying as a student, you will be dealt with appropriately.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think it's important too that parents, like, that starts at home, right? The parents even encourage their own children.
Teach one another, how to interact with people,
Yes,
right? Yeah.
exactly.
Social
how to interact,
skills.
right? How to interact with each other, and even how to stand up for yourself,
Right,
right? Like,
right.
there's nothing wrong with that,
Right,
you know.
right, of
And
course.
that's something that we have instilled in our children because you know we know that sending them to school, they're one of thousands of children. So it's obvious that every issue cannot be rectified by an administrator, nor, you know, like you said, they don't want to be a snitch, quote unquote, right?
Right.
However, if it's very serious, then we always encourage the children to go and tell an administrator, especially if it's life-threatening or things of that sort. But I think that starts at home too, is you have to tell your kids, listen, go and tell the authority, go and tell your teacher, go and tell the principal, something like that, and have your kids develop a relationship with the administrators and with the teachers, so that way they know who they are, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important as well, you know, to even just encourage the families to have that, you know, start a baseline at home.
Right.
100%.
Yeah.
We're talking about cameras in the classroom. That could also fall into security, which is actually a humongous issue. That we're on the anniversary of the Stoneman massacre.